the Batman.
It's starting to feel like you really can't keep Alan Ritchson away from the DC Universe for long, because every time things quiet down, some new detail pops up that pulls him right back into the conversation. And this time, he isn't the only one stirring excitement. James Gunn has been dropping pieces of information himself, and when you combine that with the newest update on DC's upcoming Batman projects, it becomes pretty clear that the road ahead is shaping up to be very different from what fans may be used to. So it feels like the perfect time to dig into everything we've learned from Gunn's evolving vision to which actors may be stepping into the darker corners of these universes, both in DC and even over on the Marvel side. While promoting his new Prime Video action comedy Playdate, Ritchson sat down with Screen Rant and opened up a little more than expected about the conversations he's been having with Gunn's DC Studios. People have been wondering whether he'd want to take on a traditional heroic role again or try something that leans more into the morally messy side of things. And for the first time, he finally gave the clearest hint yet. It turns out he isn't chasing anything squeaky clean. According to him, the talks with DC have centered around characters who aren't exactly poster perfect. That's the conversation I've been having with them, he explained, emphasizing that he wants to step into someone who's a little more complicated. He even told them what kind of personality he'd like to play, and how that type of character could shape the tone of their universe. And he seems to believe that DC wants something in that direction too. Basically, he wants to get his hands dirty, just not in the way fans might have expected. So even though people kept pushing the idea that he should be the next Batman, it looks like that's not happening. At least, not for him. For months now, fans have been campaigning for Ritchson to pick up the cape and cowl in The Brave and the Bold, the Batman and Robin movie set inside Gunn's rebooted universe. Ritchson didn't ignore the buzz either. Back in August 2025, he acknowledged in a Variety interview that he did talk to Gunn about the character. But even though the conversation happened, he doesn't see Bruce Wayne in his future. He put it pretty plainly. He respects Gunn. He appreciates the fan support, but he doesn't want to mislead anyone into thinking Batman is happening for him. He does, however, believe that something else is coming down the line with DC, and he hopes that stays true. And honestly, that wouldn't be surprising, because Ritchson already has a long history with superhero roles. If he officially joins the DCU, it'll actually be his third time stepping into this kind of world. So it's safe to say he really does enjoy these characters. His first superhero gig was back in 2005 when he played Arthur Curry Aquaman in Smallville, long before the character became a blockbuster figure. Later, he went darker with Hank Hall, also known as Hawk, in Titans, where he delivered one of the show's most memorable performances. That role was emotionally heavy and brutally physical, especially since the character was eventually killed off in Season 3. Gunn has been openly supportive of Ritchson for years. He even talked about being a huge fan of his work on the Happy Sad Confused podcast in 2024. According to Gunn, Ritchson isn't just a strong actor, he's someone Gunn genuinely likes as a person. So it feels like only a matter of time before something official happens. Meanwhile, on the Batman-related side of things, a brand new update about one of DC's upcoming spin-off movies has started turning heads. It involves the audition process, and what makes it stand out is that the film appears to be embracing a production style very different from what fans typically associate with Batman. Usually, Batman's adaptations focus on gritty realism or stylized noir, but this time, the approach seems far more experimental. When you look at DC's broader history, some of its most inventive projects like Gotham, The Penguin, or even Teen Titans were the ones that pushed boundaries. Those releases proved fans are open to bold interpretations, so the idea that DC is testing out something visually fresh fits perfectly into that pattern. The studio behind this unusual upcoming project is Swaybox Studios, known for their puppetry meets animation work. They're involved in the dynamic Duo movie, which focuses on Dick Grayson and Jason Todd, two of the most iconic characters to ever carry the Robin mantle in the comics. On November 15, 2025, Swaybox posted a casting call specifically for Momo animators, which is a term referring to their in-house technology that blends live action, CGI, and stop-motion puppetry. This audition process isn't about voice acting. Instead, They're searching for performers who can physically help bring the movie's hybrid animation style to life. In their words, the job is similar to puppetry and dance, because the performers have to manipulate and embody the movement of these characters on camera. What all this means is that Dynamic Duo may become one of the most technically unusual Batman-related films to date. Its proposed mixture of animation forms already sets it apart visually, but it also demands a very specialized team behind the scenes. So even though fans don't know the full story yet, it's clear the movie is aiming for something distinct rather than retreading familiar ground. This shift could end up being significant for DC Studios as a whole. Historically, DC has relied heavily on big live-action films because of the instant excitement they generate and the massive box office results they're capable of pulling in. But because many superhero movies follow similar formulas, there's been a growing desire for fresh storytelling approaches. Dynamic Duo might be the project that challenges those expectations in a major way. Its style could push the DC universe toward more variety, or it could live on its own as an Elseworld tale, which Gunn has said is a possibility. Either way, the studio seems committed to making it stand out, which could reshape the way fans think about Batman's world on screen. And speaking of Batman, Jensen Ackles has been part of that conversation too. Most fans know him from roles where he plays characters with sharp instincts, fighting skills, and charisma traits that line up surprisingly well with the Dark Knight. In his new movie Countdown, Ackles plays a detective involved in a secret task force dealing with a spiraling conspiracy, which only strengthens the sense that he gravitates naturally toward intense, complex characters. When Collider's Tanya Hussein asked him which DC role he'd take if James Gunn called, Ackles didn't hide his ambition. He would love to play Batman. But he also acknowledged that stepping into the cowl is a massive responsibility because so many iconic performances already exist. He said he'd have to lean heavily on Gunn, the writers, and the directing team for direction. Even though it would be nerve-wracking, he'd still approach it with pride because anyone who gets to play Batman understands how meaningful that role is. It's understandable why he'd feel the pressure. Bruce Wayne is one of the most psychologically layered characters in comic book history, but Ackles might be more prepared for that role than some people realize, because he already has experience playing Batman in animation. He voiced Batman in several films in the DC Tomorrowverse, starting with Batman The Long Halloween Parts 1 and 2. That project was a major milestone because it was the first time the famous Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale story was fully adapted. Ackles delivered a measured, emotional performance that blended seriousness with vulnerability. One standout moment involves Batman speaking to Catwoman about her complicated ties to the Falcone crime family, where his voice subtly shifts to show the cracks in Bruce's rigid emotional armor. Ackles also played Jason Todd, Red Hood, in the acclaimed animated movie Batman Under the Red Hood. That film explores some of the most emotionally explosive material in Batman's entire history. Todd's rage, trauma, and need for closure push him into confrontation with Batman, culminating in an unforgettable argument about why Batman refuses to kill the Joker. Ackles' performance is intense and layered, grounding the story in raw emotion. Given how well he handled those roles, it's not a stretch to imagine him playing a compelling live-action Batman, especially since he's excelled in shows with dark themes like Supernatural and The Boys. And considering Gunn recently emphasized that he wants to keep the dark in Dark Knight, meaning no campy or comedic tone, Ackles' history fits that vision perfectly. So whether it's Richson leaning into morally messy characters, Swaybox redefining what a Batman spin-off can look like, or Ackles potentially stepping up as a future Bruce Wayne, it feels like DC's next era could be filled with fresh takes and bold experiments. And because Gunn and Peter Safran are steering the ship with such a clear direction, the studio's next chapter has a good chance of surprising fans in ways they've been waiting for.